For those of you who did not watch my Christmas Miracle almond tree drum video that was before this one, please go watch that in detail. And the reason why I was pondering what God was up to in that video, which I'd like to explain in this video, I left out the part of the story after John Good, the senior vice president of DW Drums, the almond tree drums popped up on my cell phone. So, you know, I compiled everything that I heard John Good saying that I knew from writing my almond tree book about the Lord. I knew that there were things in what he was saying that revealed the Messiah of Israel and the connection of his wife being Esther and all of this stuff. So there was another part of the story which I forgot to tell that was extremely important. And when somebody mentioned Karen Carpenter to me, all of a sudden it popped into my head and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot to say that part of the story. So here's what happened, and you'll have to go watch the other video before this one that I filmed. It was January 1st, New Year's Day, that I filmed it. And I don't know whether YouTube put a January 1st or January 2nd upload date on it. So what happened next? After I was getting my Chinese lunch and I was taking it into the car to eat it there in the bitter cold temperatures outside, and then, you know, I had the almond tree drums manufacturing story pop up on my cell phone. And I told you I made all of those biblical connections because of my almond tree book. And then I told the whole story about how John Good met Perry Charter, who owns the T&P farms where they farm almond trees. So there's more to the story, and I'm going to tell you that now. That afternoon, when it got to be around dusk, when I came back to the hotel, I set up my laptop, and I was just marveling at what God had done that day with that almond tree video about the almond drums. And I was hooking up my laptop, and then I was sitting there and watching pastors on YouTube just give, you know, like a 15-minute update on prophecy. And all of a sudden, this Rabbi WEISBERG showed up in my feed because I had subscribed to him, and the name of his video had something to do with Trump having the victory and believing that according to calculations that have been done by the sages of Israel and unlocking the key that Daniel had sealed up the book until the time of the end, they were able to calculate and undo that, turn that knob, you know, with the key, which gave them calculations until the coming of the Messiah. And what's really incredible to me is that their calculations calculated exactly to Israel becoming a nation in 1948. But according to this rabbi and all of these Jewish sage rabbis over the centuries, what they had calculated, and they actually had this part of Daniel revealed to them, I think it was sometime in the 1980s, like 1982 or something, close to that. So it's fascinating that the rabbis had calculated that the Messiah would come at the end by no later than 2027. And they accurately had calculated 1948 as the year that Israel would be restored as a nation. So the thing about it is, the rabbi stated that the Messiah will appear for the redemption before the 2027 date, and he would have to appear before 2025. And then he gave another calculation that gave the date of that the Messiah would have to come by 2022. As soon as I heard that, of course, the Messiah would have to come and appear for the rapture first, and then the end would be the time that he said he would be coming the second time. That would be the second coming. And so far, these calculations have been accurate. I will leave the link to the rabbi's message, and the calculations are kind of more in the middle of the video. So I will leave the link to his message in the description box. And he explains why and all of that. So I'll let you go to his video and see that. So let me tell the second part of my almond tree story. So when I saw the DW Drums almond tree drum kit being manufactured in John Good's story, when I came home later and I was hooking up the laptop and watching these pastors, well, the same Rabbi, WEISBERG, he had a video and he was talking about, he said that Trump has to fulfill certain things, and the election of 2024 would come too late for him to fulfill them because the Messiah will be coming before that. Is that not chilling? So what's really fascinating is that after the almond tree drums popping up on my phone that day, the day before Christmas Eve, the 23rd of December, well, as the rabbi's video popped up, you know, it gave me notification that there was a new video. So I just automatically started watching it, and he was talking about Trump and all this. And all of a sudden, he just breaks from talking about the election, and he starts talking about Miriam being the person who was the drummer, and all the women with her played the drums. And he was just saying Miriam played the drums, all the women with her played the drums. And you know, what I had told you was that I had been praying, you know, weeks before this, that God would restore my music to me. You know, things that people did that kind of sabotaged my path to begin with, and I was praying God would restore it. So I decided to look up in the Strong's Concordance, and I found basically that the drum that Miriam had was called a toph, and they called it a timbrel or a tabret. And of course it was basically a hand drum that probably had the zills on it, and zills are the little metal pieces that are, you know, like cymbals. A zill is a cymbal, and a tambourine has the little cymbals that ring, you know, when they clank together. You know, they found a pair of ancient cymbals over there, I believe it was in Bethany, where Jesus used to go to meet Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, and there was a cemetery over there, and they found an ancient pair of cymbals that were called zills, Z-I-L-S. What I find fascinating about that is one of the major cymbal makers, the cymbals that I love are Zildjians, and the story about the Zildjian family, and the first part of the word Zildjian is Zil, the cymbal maker. So the Zils, the Zildjian family, basically, they were Armenian, and they had this ancient method of making the cymbals from centuries ago, and perhaps they were the family that made the cymbals for the temple, who knows, and God's holy temple in Jerusalem. So these were, I think they also call them zilzalim. but they were the ancient symbols. And now the Zildjian family, their family is still making the symbols, and they've had multiple generations with their secret formula of making all kinds of different varied pitched symbols, and they're the best in the world as far as I'm concerned. I especially like the ones that are called K. K for Kimberly, but they have a little bit darker tone, but some of the symbols, they have a high pitched, and in the Psalms, God said to praise God with the high sounding cymbals. Now, whether he means doing a big speed roll on the cymbal where it gets real high sounding, like the kind of like an ocean surf coming in, and rolling on that and having the sound crash at the end. I don't know if that's what he means or if he just means the pitch. And all of these things are fascinating to me. I truly think that one day God is going to have perhaps even the Zildjian company help to prepare some symbols for the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, and I think that would be fantastic. So the drum that Miriam played, and she was an expert in Strong's Concordance, that's number 8596, Toph, T-O-P-H. Of course, it says that Miriam was praising God with songs, with tabret, with timbrel, and with the lyre. It's interesting to me that, bells are in a bell lyre. So it's possible these could have been some type of cymbals mounted making a lyre, L-Y-R-E, or, the possibility, of course, of the harp, also called a lyre. It says that Toph is from an unused word, and the definition is a timbrel, a tambourine, and settings, tambourine, tambourines, timbrels. That's the definition. I have to put my glasses on to read this, but it says the Brown Driver Briggs says about it that it's a noun, masculine, timbrel, tambourine. And it mentions several scriptures. Timbrel, held and struck with the hand, especially by dancing women, often with other musical instruments, a sign of merriment or gladness, exultation, triumph, used by prophets in ecstasy. So here's the rabbi talking about Miriam playing her drum with the women, and her instrument, and she was a prophetess. So it's used by prophets in ecstasy of praising God. And so God was giving me this message the same day as showing me John Good's Almond Tree drums prior to this. And this finished out the day with the rabbi talking about the women playing the drums. And, she was a prophet of Israel. So you have right there, you have the women playing the timbrels, the tambourines, the drums, the hand drums, and dancing going on with that. It's kind of like King David danced before the Lord, before the Ark of the Covenant, and just, it's an overjoy. It mentions in 1 Samuel a psaltery and a pipe, a harp, a flute, a lyre, with joy, with musical instruments, psalteries, castanets, and of course we had the, in that terminology, finger cymbals, little tiny cymbals attached where you attach them to the thumb and forefinger and you make them sound together. Just like Psalm 149:3 says, "Let them sing praises to him with timbrel and lyre." Isaiah 5:12 mentions the harp by tambourine and flute, or pipe. In the Englishman's Concordance, the word for timbrels is batupum. And of course it means the same thing, exultation, triumph. Women often with other musical instruments, a sign of merriment and gladness. So you can see that women did have an important musical role to play a long time ago. Now remember, there was also the Song of Moses, the songs of Deborah and Hannah, the women, and in 1 Samuel 18:7, where women are found singing a song of celebration. There were the Psalms 120 through 134, the songs of ascent, which were to be sung when approaching Jerusalem. The song of Miriam and Moses, found in Exodus 15, and that was a celebration of the crossing of the Red Sea. Deborah's song, Praising the Lord, is found in Judges 5. Another example of vocal music was the temple choir spoken of in the 2 Chronicles 5:13 and 29:27. Some of these songs may have been accompanied by a few instruments or only a tambourine. A tambourine's really a hand drum with the zills on it. But some may have been sung a cappella. Scholars are unsure of the musical context of these sections, only having the texts, and so no understandable music notation. So the Hebrew lyre, L-Y-R-E, is the ancient kinnor, the musical instrument of King David, and it was played with a plectrum when accompanying singing or dancing, but it was apparently plucked with the fingers when used as a solo instrument. The term sometimes referred generically to stringed instruments. But it's interesting that there's also the bell lyre. They have an ancient relief from Nineveh of the kinnor instrument on display at the British Museum. And as the Judahite inhabitants of Lachish are sent into exile in 705 BCE, they are forced to play the kinnor, the harp, and this is depicted on this ancient stone wall. I find it interesting that yoke lutes, you know, the lute in medieval times, the lute was like similar to a guitar, but more of a mandolin shape. And this lyre, L-Y-R-E, are a class of string instruments subfamily of lutes. I was thinking about Prince having the song Plectrum Electrum, and this must be where he got it, the plectrum. It says the plectrum is the strings were set in vibration by the fingers or a little stick, which is the plectrum. As Joseph says, bow instruments were unknown to the ancients. The strings were made of gut. Metal strings were not used in ancient times. The body of the instrument was generally made of cypress, in very precious instruments of sandalwood. And that's exactly what I wrote in my book, that they used sandalwood, and that King David used that in the harp building. And of course there's also the Hebrew harp, the nevel. This is the bell lyre that I was talking about, and it's got a fairly reasonably shaped resemblance to the ancient Hebrew harp. A lyre, described in definition in Encyclopedia Britannica, says that a lyre is a stringed musical instrument having a yoke or two arms and a crossbar projecting out from and level with the body. The strings run from the tailpiece on the bottom or front of the instrument to the crossbar. Most lyres are plucked, but a few are bowed, so that would be the plectrum. Box lyres are instruments having a box-like wooden body with a wooden soundboard In some instances, the arms are hollow extensions of the body, as in the ancient Greek kithara. Now, when Miriam and Moses were singing the Song of the Sea after the Red Sea crossing, and I talk all about this song, and God saying that there was going to be a new song sung at the end of days that only these people would know. The harpers would be playing it, a new song of Moses. And down here in Exodus 15, starting in verse 20, it says, "And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea." And what I find fabulous about Miriam playing the drums there with the women, that song where she's playing the drums and exalting God, is the verse up in chapter 15 of Exodus, verse 2, where they say, "The Lord is my strength and my song, and he is become my Yeshua." He has become my salvation. He is my God. That's telling you right there that Yeshua is your God, Israel. And that he will prepare him a habitation, my Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Right there in Moses' Song of the Sea, with Miriam playing the drums, they're professing and exalting God as Yeshua, God. In verse 15, the song says, "Thou in thy mercy hast led forth the people, which thou hast redeemed. Thou hast guided them in thy strength unto thy holy habitation. The people shall hear and be afraid. Sorrow shall take hold of the inhabitants of Palestina." When they crossed over the Red Sea and they're singing this song, they say, "O Lord, till the people pass over, which thou hast purchased." And we know that Yeshua came and redeemed not only his people, but the whole world. And those that turn and put their trust in him will be saved and redeemed by the hand of this God who identifies himself as becoming the people's Yeshua, their Messiah, their Savior, their Redeemer. And so they praised God with the high-sounding cymbals. I believe the bells of the lyre, the zills. I believe God would like the zildjian cymbals. And maybe they'll make some that say holiness to the Lord and dedicate them in Jerusalem. But it's really, truly profound that the women were found being not only the prophetess Miriam, but she was prophesying like King David did when he played the harp. He was prophesying God's messages through the Holy Spirit. And so God used the drums with Miriam to prophesy as well. And having this message the same day as finding the John Good D.W. almond tree drums story on my phone, and then having that message brought to me later, just before sundown, I was really thinking, God is really bringing me a profound message. And I just couldn't believe that these two things came together on the same day. And of course, I wrote about all the musical instruments of the temple in my harp, and God had revealed that to me about the sandalwood being one of the sources of wood for the holy instruments. And I kind of go into detail about that in my book about the instruments of King David. I just found something kind of interesting. You know, Miriam, she became leprous and she was shut outside the camp. And that word is in Hebrew, segar, to shut or close, as in the door. She was shut out. And what's fascinating about that is that it says that it was a shut door. You close the door behind oneself from within. And you know, speaking about the Messiah, he was crucified outside the gates of the city, outside the camp. And he's going to come and take those he's redeemed to be with him in that first time that the rabbi mentioned that the Messiah is going to show up before the end. So he's actually admitting he's coming twice. And the first time is going to be for the redemptions, which means that would be the rapture. And those who have not accepted him will be shut outside the door from going in. And, you know, when the virgins that had the oil in their lamps were ready, they went in and the door was shut. And the others were left outside the camp. And, you know, what happened outside the camp is people perished. Now let me go back to the story of the senior VP of DW Drums, John Good, that video of the almond tree drums that showed up on my phone the day before Christmas Eve. And remember, I told you that he met up with the guy in the restaurant that was sitting in his chair, and it turns out that guy is related to, well, his wife has family that owns the T&P farms in Arbuckle, California, where they are growing the almond trees in these huge orchards. And he said this little town, Arbuckle, that you could miss it on the map if you closed your eyes while going by it. But, and let me just tell you something miraculous that's happened with that. I looked up Arbuckle in its Scottish habitation name from Arbuckle, earlier Arbuckle. In Gaelic, it means herdsman's portion of land. Why would that be important, do you think? Because this testimony of the Lord, and then the rabbi's talking about that Trump has some things he has to finish up to prepare the way for the Messiah. And one of the things that Trump, he said, had to accomplish was to pronounce the land as Israel's land. And this would be the Lord, the shepherd of Israel, proclaiming the land that belongs to him. The Lord is the herdsman, the shepherd of the sheep, and his land is being restored to himself, to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And that's what the name of this little town Arbuckle means. And that's where the almond groves are, the testimony of the Lord in my book that connects to the almond tree drums. And now this beautiful person contacted me that has lived in Arbuckle her entire life, and she has been walking in the orchards of T&P farms talking to God amongst the almond trees. And she contacted me telling me that she watched my video while she was in the orchard of the almond trees. So the trees, with my testimony of the almond tree, is proclaimed amongst the orchard of the almond trees without me even knowing this is happening. And she just contacted to tell me that she knows Perry Charter, the one who owns the almond tree farm. And she's going to get this information of the testimony of the Messiah in my book to Perry Charter. And Perry Charter, of course, knows John Good, the senior VP of DW Drums, the one that has the almond tree drums. So God is up to something, and then God brings this other piece of the story from the rabbi that the Messiah is soon to come. And not only that, but the fact that Miriam was the prophetess with the women also playing drums and praising God. You should be praying that God opens these doors, because God was behind it. When I had been in my own private prayers, asking God not only to restore my music to me, but also to open doors that no man could open and no man could shut, and also to glorify himself in this testimony. And what you are seeing being revealed right now is a living prophecy coming to pass before your eyes. This is so exciting. I can't even tell you how all of these things come together. You know, and I have some Scottish roots in Scotland, as well as that Arbuckle name, meaning the herdsman of the sheep. The Lord is our shepherd, and the sheep of the land, and God marries the land of Israel. And there's so much in my book about that. So it's incredible what God is doing, just incredible. And this is part 2 of the last video where I gave the transcript of John Good's message of how he went and harvested the almond trees in Arbuckle, California. And now Georgette has contacted me that she's lived in Arbuckle her whole life and walks amongst the almond trees, playing my video without me knowing it. And now we're connecting. And man, if you aren't excited, I don't know. I am totally thrilled, because this just shows how God is actively working. He's bringing forth something that we can't even comprehend. And I'm going to keep updating this so that you can see how this miraculous story develops. I will place it in his hands. Georgette will place it in, she said she was going to show her pastor in their little town this testimony. And I'm sure she said she was going to show it to the Perry Charter family, because they own the almond orchard, and apparently they are Christians. And Perry Charter knows John Good, who made the drums from his almond trees. Wow. If you don't have the chills running up and down your arms by this point, wow. So I'm going to keep you informed. If anything happens, I will let you know. And I hope to be talking to Georgette pretty soon. And we'll see where it goes from here. God's almond tree testimony continues. And it's absolutely thrilling. And it's thrilling to know that the rabbis have accurately calculated. They knew from Daniel's prophecy that in the last days this would be unveiled, to be able to calculate things. And they calculated 1948, and they said that the Messiah is absolutely coming at the end in 2027. And so the Messiah's got to come almost within the year or so. So we don't know. But he also said that the redemption was foreshadowed to happen during the time of the Passover season. So that's very interesting, because many of us talked about that last year. With that, I will soon be in touch again and make another video as soon as something develops. But be praying for me, because God is doing something, and I knew it when I heard this rabbi talk about Miriam and the women playing the drums right after getting the almond tree drum video. So there you have it. It's exciting and it's thrilling, and I hope you're blessed by this. Thanks for supporting me and partnering with me in this channel to keep this testimony going. It's so exciting. It's just going to be so thrilling when God just brings this around the world. I can't even tell you how thrilling this is. I'll talk to you soon. And you know, Georgette, who told me that she's lived in Arbuckle her entire life, the place that means the herdsman of the sheep, or the herdsman of the sheep of the land. And God's restoring his land of Israel to himself for his sheep. Georgette told me that she had been kind of, talking to God and waiting to hear from God. And her grandson, I think it was in the hospital for some sort of infection. So we pray for his immediate healing. And she said that she went to, look at her computer or phone or whatever, and my video about Arbuckle and John Good's almond trees from DW popped up in her phone. Was the first video that popped up to her, and she is over there in the orchard that I told you about, the almond tree orchard. She has a house near there, and back of her property she can go walk amongst the almond trees. And she's played my video as she's walking in the orchard of almond trees. And she said that my video popped up in her feed as the first video that came up. And when she heard the word Arbuckle, she said she sat straight up and listened, and she thought this story was so amazing. And she said she knows Perry Charter's family, and she's going to show it to the pastor of their small church, like I told you, and she's going to notify Perry Charter's family, who owns the almond tree farm. So for her to have my video about John Good's almond tree drums show up in her feed right at a time she needed a message from God, that God heard her even in the little tiny town of Arbuckle, meaning herdsman of the sheep of the land. You just cannot even imagine the story, the living story that God has woven here. I'm glad I remembered that, because I left out this part of the story in the first video, and so this is the second part. But I'm going to keep updating you, and that is just incredible to me. And of course, John Good, John being one of the beloved disciples of Jesus, and the meaning of John and good. So I just think it's just a living prophecy coming to pass, and God is on the move, and God is revealing the Messiah, because the redemption draweth nigh. And until then, I am going to continue to play the drums on this earth, and whatever happens in heaven with drums and music, I will be thrilled. But I'm going to keep playing here while I'm here, and I'm going to keep praising and exalting God with my music in whatever way he allows me to, and that he restores me in his glorious way, just like Miriam the prophetess beating on the drums and just praising God with exaltation. Hallelujah, this has happened. This is something that just happened today, and it's January 3rd, and this connection with Georgette, who lives in Arbuckle, happened today. And she said she's actually listened to my channel for some time and knew the story about my mom and all this. So when she heard that video pop up about Arbuckle, she sat straight up, and God gave her the most incredible message from me that lifted her spirits out of her despair, and she knew God was speaking to her. And she also believes that God did send her to my video. We both believe that. And we'll see what God's going to do next. Till then, I'm signing off and I'll talk to you soon. I hope this blessed you miraculously. All right, I'm going to play you something. This should be very unusual. Thank you very much. Bye.